Welcome to the short video about how to make a Swiss roll. In this particular video I'm actually showing you how to make a chocolate Swiss roll where I am adapting the recipe to change the 75 grams of flour to 50 grams of flour to 25 grams of cocoa powder. This will make a traditional Christmas chocolate log type sponge. To start with, we need to line our tin. So you need quite a wide tin that's quite shallow, if you can see. It's not very deep. Then you need a large piece of greaseproof paper, and what you need to do is line your tin. It's really important that the tin is lined accurately, otherwise it will interfere with the shape of your final sponge. I have sprayed my baking tray with some oil, or you could smother it with a little bit of butter or margarine on the end of some kitchen paper and just smear it around the edges so the greaseproof paper should stay in place. Push it into the corners like so. You can just see I've pushed in. If you really put your finger in there, you should be able to make like a little notch, and then this is the clever bit. Lift out the greaseproof paper and see where you've notched it. Just trying to put it so you can see. Then cut to the notch. And do this on all of your four corners. And what will happen is that greaseproof paper will overlap and allow for you to have a sharp corner on your greaseproof. Now push in the paper with your fingers and let the paper sort of tuck in behind when you've got the corners. You see, it tucks in behind. This one here, the longer bits just go behind and then they won't interfere with your Swiss roll. Making sure your corners are really nice and straight. And that is your tin all neatly prepared. If it's all screwed up, your Swiss roll will end up being a very peculiar shape. Now, in some recipes, they will ask you to separate your eggs into whites and then yolks. For this particular recipe, I find it works just as well by actually adding your egg yolk and egg white at once, along with your sugar. It does still take quite a while, but this, it's a little bit more safer, so you're more likely to get guaranteed results. Wash my hands. Into the eggs, I'm adding my caster sugar. Now on the recipe it says 75 grams for the sponge and another 25 grams when you're rolling it out. So in here I've just got my 75 grams. Now with an electric whisk you can do this by hand, but it'll take you a rather long time. So with an electric whisk on a high speed you continue to whisk it until it's light and fluffy and you can see a trail that's left behind, and that's called the ribbon stage. I'm going to show you the different stages so you can understand what it is you're looking for. So first stage, this is really liquidy, but you can see that the sugar and the egg is well combined. This has got to go light and fluffy and expand in volume. You can see it's expanding in volume and it's gone to a lighter colour, but we're still not there. This stage, it's much more light and fluffy, if you can see, but it's still not quite ready yet, because if I lift my whisk out of the mixture and trail it across the surface, you can't see a trail left behind. That means it's not at the ribbon stage. So this point it's much more fluffy, but it's still not at the ribbon stage. I can still see, I don't know if you can see, that there is no pattern left behind. Well, I've managed to redecorate my kitchen. Now, this, I would say, is the ribbon stage, and I don't know if you can see with the light. So when I pick it up, it is leaving a trail on the surface, so I can see where it's going. And that means it's at the perfect stage. Some eggs will volume up much more than others, and that depends on the age of your eggs. So don't feel bad if yours has more or less volume. Just going to whisk this for a couple more seconds. So I would say the mixture you're kind of looking for is something that looks like melted vanilla ice cream that's just gone a bit sloppy like a Mr. Whippy. So into there I'm going to sift in my flour. This is plain flour. Now if you're making a vanilla one you would just use 75 grams of plain flour. This one I am actually making chocolate. So I am sifting in badly 25 grams of cocoa and then 50 grams of plain flour, and this will give it a different sort of colour and flavour, and this will probably be more suited to most of you who might be making a Christmas log. So if you get a few grains at the end, just gently touch them. Don't try and force them through because you might find it's a bit gritty at the end and you don't want any hard lumps in your Swiss roll. There we go. Now, the whisk has been finished with. If we carry on whisking this, we're going to end up with trouble. So, this has trapped a load of air inside of it, and this is really good. So what we need to do is carefully fold in the flour. And I don't know if you can see, you fold, go from the bottom and back over to the top. So you can fold like that, so go from the bottom over to the top. The other method is called a figure of 8, where you literally draw a figure of 8 with your spoon. But you cannot mix it at this point. If you mix it like you normally would mix a batter, all those air bubbles that you've worked really hard to create would actually then disappear. So this folding technique is ensuring that we are not going to crush as many air bubbles and we're going to end up with a nice smooth mixture. Now one thing I did wrong is I would probably combine the flour and the cocoa powder together before you mix it in, just so you don't get like those sections like you can see in mine where you've got some bits have got flour in and some bits have got cocoa powder. So it's far better for them to be mixed in together. Now this is going to take a bit of time. This is probably second to the whisking to get your air in the mixture, the longest stage. And I would say it would start to feel a little bit like you've just made meringues and you are just spooning that out. Now you need to make sure there is no pockets left of that cocoa powder or of the flour, otherwise when you roll out your sponge or cut into it, you'll have a small section of flour or cocoa powder that would not be thoroughly mixed in. But I don't want you to beat it either. So it's very gently, perseverance, maybe turn the bowl around just to make sure you've got some, because what's happened is the flour and the cocoa powder is far heavier than the egg white. So you may find there's little hidden pockets of that mixture. And this recipe is really versatile because if you've got someone in your family that is dairy intolerant, or milk intolerant, sorry, you can use this because it doesn't involve any margarine or butter. Now I'm going to let this pour out into my tray. and we don't really want to over agitate it, so scrape it too much when it's in the bowl. Little movement as possible. It is going to puff up, probably to about another third. If you fancy doing some artistic work, some people have piped a design onto the base of the parchment paper, then frozen it, and then taken it out of the oven, and then piped the other contrasting colour on top. And this is how you get some of those designs that you've been looking at for the icicles, or maybe baubles or flowers or dots or whatever it might be. Now there's my mixture in my tin. I'm just going to very gently, even my mixing, I've found there's a couple bits there that I've not mixed in perhaps as good as I could. I'm using my spatula very gently. Now, unlike some cakes, you can probably get away with it not being very level. With this one, it doesn't cook for very long, so it's really important you try to make sure it's really level. And you can see once again, I'm doing this really gently and taking my time. So, going back to the parable of the horse and the tortoise and the hare, you need to be more tortoise. So once you think you've got all your mixture nice and flat, just going to scrape that off. You can see it's really important it's neatly set out. I'm going to pop this in the oven for about 10 to 15 minutes. You've got to watch it really closely, and the only way you can test it to know if it's ready is you touch the surface and see if it springs back up. If it does, you know it's ready. If it doesn't, then you need to leave it in there for a few more minutes, but you do need to watch it very carefully. So touch the top, see if it springs back up, and then you'll know whether it's ready. You need to do this very carefully, because if you leave it in there for too long, it'll go really tough, and if you don't leave it in there long enough, it won't be cooked and it will be raw. So I'm going to pop this in the oven. If you're making a normal Swiss roll, what often you will notice is there's lovely amount of caster sugar on the outside. Now I'm going to show you this technique because it's really important. So if you are making a traditional jam Swiss roll, bear in mind you could also turn a jam Swiss roll into a trifle this Christmas if you're wanting to do it, or you could do it for a birthday or a trifle for any other time of the year. It would be great. So I've just sprinkled the sugar over the surface, and what will happen is I will get the Swiss roll and turn it out onto the sugar, and this is done immediately. So with oven gloves I turn it out over, and then I'll spread it with some jam and then roll it up. Now if you're looking to add some of these fancy flavours such as a ganache, a whipped cream, a creme pat, a mousse, whatever it might be, you still need to roll it up, but you don't put the filling in there. Instead you can place a piece of greaseproof paper and you roll it up, and that will keep its shape, because the Swiss roll is a bit similar to like a plastic. So when it cools, it will set in its shape. You'll still be able to unroll it slightly to put your filling in, but if you don't roll it first of all, what will happen is it will just fold into rectangles and it'll be impossible to fill. So get yourself prepared, get a piece of greaseproof paper, wish some sugar on. You could add cocoa powder to that as well if that was a flavour you wanted to add, or if you were looking at adding some other sort of flavours, you could do freeze-dried raspberries, blend those up, put those over the surface, whatever it is you'd like to do. A bit of cinnamon, the world's your oyster. So my sponge has just come out the oven, and if I touch the surface, it's springing back. Now immediately from taking out the oven, I very carefully drop it down on top of my caster sugared paper. This all has to be done really, really quickly. So if you are going to put jam in it, you need to have your jam ready with a palette knife ready to smear that on. And now you need to remove your greaseproof paper as quickly as possible. It will be really hot, so really take care of your fingertips. Here we go. Just take care you don't rip off a section. Now with my table knife, I'm going to make an indent, don't know if you can see, about 1 centimetre away from the end. And it's only an indent. It's just going to encourage the sponge to roll over. I'm actually not going to fill this straight away, just because I think many of you will probably do your fillings with buttercream. So when you do that, fold over the first bit. I don't know if you can see. Fold over that first section, and then normally you just pull away to keep that there. Make sure you get the first roll nice and tight, and then you just pull and roll. Can you see what's happening? It's probably a really good angle like that. And then keep on rolling until the paper is off and your Swiss roll is neatly rolled up. Now, as you can see, this is one without the jam inside. If I left it in the oven for too long, my Swiss roll would crack a lot. Now, if you look on this end, I personally think that's cracked quite a bit. When you've got one with cocoa powder, what will happen is the cocoa powder is much drier, so it will suck in a lot of the moisture. So this can happen, but if you cut the ends off, it looks lovely. I normally do that in lesson. I cut off about 1 centimetre because they're normally drier than the middle of the sponge. Now I'm going to leave this wrapped up until it's cooled down, and then I will unwrap it, put my fillings inside and re-roll it. If you were wanting to put your jam in it straight away, I wouldn't have put the greaseproof paper on top. I'd have smeared it with jam and rolled it. So I'll talk to you about my filling. So my filling is going to have some double cream, which I'm going to whisk. Yes, you can use an electric hand whisker and it would be far quicker, but mine's just in the dishwasher. And here I've got some homemade jam from the cherries on my tree, but it's quite liquidy. I didn't quite make it quite right, so it just shows you that everyone can make mistakes. So this jam being liquidy is going to give the appeal of something like a Black Forest Gâteau. So the chocolate sponge with a liquidy cherry jam and then whipped cream, because the jam will sink into the sponge, and this will be a lovely dessert. Now you need to whisk this until it has like a spooning consistency. Now this is getting thicker, but still not thick enough. You can see it's much thicker than it was a minute ago, but it's still a bit droopy. So when it comes to the latter stages, the last bit, it happens really quickly. And if I carried on whisking that, I would end up with butter. So that's a consistency you'll stop at. If you're going to put something into the cream, let's say a raspberry coulis or a chocolate sauce or something, just take care that you stop before this point. So just going to scrape out the last of this cream. And this could be your buttercream. It doesn't have to be cream as in what I've just put in, proper cream. And you could change the cream. You could put like lime in it, lime zest, lemon zest. You could grate some chocolate into it to make it look a little bit like, I think it's an Italian dessert. Can't remember the name of it. Where it's called, where you have little flecks of different chocolate in there. But make sure you've done your filling nice and even. I'm pushing it right to the ends there. Maybe make sure you don't go too much out the sides. I'm going to wipe off my palette knife. Then I'm going to do what I did earlier, which was to roll it. So it's remembered where the last roll is. So I push that down and pull it. You might want to push against it, and you can then see it's going to be a bit more difficult this time because the filling is taking up a lot of the space. And I forgot to say, don't put your filling too close to the end because it does have to roll over. That's my fault, and now I'm using a spoon and making a mess of it. But, you know, learn from my mistakes. And roll them. And then very carefully just pick it up and flatten it there. So now you can see my Swiss roll. Now it's up to you. At this stage you could then add your chocolate ganache or buttercream, or you could just give it a dusting of icing sugar. cocoa powder, or if you've used buttercream inside your cake, you could then spread the buttercream on the outside and use a fork to make the marks on the side. It's totally up to you. So one thing I will do with a sharp knife is just cut, just for presentation purposes, because if I was going to serve this as a Swiss roll without turning it into something else, do you see what I mean? As soon as I've cut that end off, it looks far more impressive. Be really careful when you're slicing, because it is a very delicate sponge, and it's even more delicate because the filling I've chosen to put in there. But there you go, you can see your sponge much better. And what we want to see is a really nice tight roll, so you haven't got gaps. I've got lots of cream filling, so it's quite fat now, my sponge. But if you haven't got the cream filling in there and it's just jam or a chocolate ganache, it needs to be nice and tight. So enjoy making your festive Swiss roll, and if you're making a plain Swiss roll, that's good too.